Investor Intelligence provides general information only. You should consider seeking independent advice to see how this information relates to your unique circumstances. Please refer to the terms and conditions available at investorintelligence.com.au for more.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Investor Intelligence. Brought to you by the team at the Property Mentors, it's your weekly podcast for all things investment and hosted by me, Phoebe Sikowski-Wallace. Firstly, guys, we hope you're enjoying your Christmas holidays and making the most of any time off that you have. Now, even though we're actually on holidays ourselves, we still wanted to make sure that you're getting your weekly episodes, and therefore we wanted to share some of our favourite episode moments over the last year and look back at some of the highlights. So we've gathered together today 5 highlights that are pretty timeless and just super insightful to different areas of not only the investing world, but just life in general. The first highlight we have for you is from episode 42, which features Dr Josie Vine, who is a senior journalism scholar from RMIT University who we met back in August. Now, here at the Property Mentors, we're across a lot of property news, but we're also aware that the media is one way of spreading things like misinformation, which can lead to things like media hype. So this chat with Josie was super interesting and, just to get a bit more insight into how the media and news cycle operates, and most importantly, why it's so important to be critical of any news that you consume. So I hope you enjoy this first highlight. Here's Josie. How important is it for people to be critical of the news they may be, reading or watching or consuming in general?
Oh, foundational, absolutely foundational to not only to getting accurate information, but foundational as in your role as a citizen who votes in elections and decides, where you're going to spend your money. I mean, you don't want to be going and spending money on a product that's, abused animals or something like that. It's absolutely foundational to everything, every little choice we make throughout the day and the big choices we make in our lives. It's absolutely foundational that you question every bit of information that you're getting from journalism or otherwise and think to yourself, who benefits from this? Yeah. Who doesn't benefit from this? Absolutely. And make sure the sources are credible. Make sure they're named sources, they're not anonymous sources. And there's a new trend in journalism at the moment called transparent journalism. And what journalists actually do is they hyperlink everything that they say. Right. Including if they've interviewed, let's say they've interviewed the head of the RBA, they hyperlink RBA and it takes the reader straight to the interview transcript. People can listen to the actual interview to make sure that what the journalist has said is fair, is accurate, there's no spin on it. Mind you, this all takes time, and I don't know about you, Phoebe, but I don't have that kind of time in my day.
No, I don't either, and I was going to say that I think a lot of people just will take whatever, and fair enough that not everyone has time to dig deeper and see if this is reliable, but, if you do have the time, you're saying that is an important thing to do.
It is, but you're also, in a way, relying on journalists to do that work for you. And so you have to, I think above all, you have to find the journalists that you trust, not just the outlets, not just because the ABC can be just as crappy as any commercial, It's about the individual journalists.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
Now, I had a hard time picking out just one highlight from this next episode as It's honestly gold from start to finish. But my second highlight for this series comes from episode 16 featuring Life Support CEO Mahlia Price, which was titled Working on Your Emotional Readiness. So emotional readiness is obviously one of the main pillars that we focus on here at the Property Mentors. And although Mahlia works in a completely different industry, the mental health industry, it was amazing to hear how similar both our industries approach certain things. So here Mahlia talks about being able to challenge a thought in order to change the behaviour that thought can bring. So I hope you enjoy. Here's Mahlia. You just mentioned the unknown, which is one of the common things that we hear that gets in the way of people achieving their goals. So things are like fear of indecision, fear of the unknown, fear of the unfamiliar. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you see that stop people from achieving their goal of say, wanting to create better mental health?
So humans are biologically experts at looking for patterns, scanning patterns, making patterns and repeating patterns. So that's what we do expertly. And that means it can go both ways. So we can continue to do what we know how to do very easily and end up with the same outcome. So whether that's success, whether that's not success, we're good at sticking to patterns. We create patterns. On the other side, it's a very fearful thing. It goes against our nature to do things that are unfamiliar to us, to do things that don't yet have a pattern in front of us. So all of those thoughts and feelings that appear from being in those unknown, challenging, uncertain situations where, in challenges that are worth succeeding in, they almost inevitably have unknowns. They require leaps of faith at certain points. They require risk that really isn't weighed up, because if it was, everyone would be doing it. So I think when you come up against those unknowns, and that happens in life, in all areas of life, and certainly, property investment, I imagine, but certainly in mental health, relationships, everything else that goes on in our lives, dealing with those unknowns is always that place where we decide, do we stay stuck in the pattern that we know, or do we adapt? Do we take that leap of faith? I think you want to make sure that leap of faith is as educated a guess as you can possibly make it. So figuring out what those elements are, figuring out that audit list, when you feel scared or you have an emotion, thoughts, feelings and behaviours occur in a loop. They interact together, and it's the job and the expertise of psychologists to know how those thoughts, feelings and behaviours interact and help change behaviour. So that's kind of the crux of it, is understanding there's an unknown situation here. You don't know how to tackle it in your best way. So if you can clock that thought, what is the thought that you're saying to yourself? Maybe it's, I don't deserve to have this success, or I don't know what I'm doing. That's going to lead to an emotion to have that thought. That emotion might be fear. It might be, shame of failing. It might be anxiety as a feeling. The behaviour that's going to follow having that thought and that feeling is going to be, for example, retreat or defensiveness, or kind of coming back to the pattern that you know. And so the essence of changing those behaviours to make better decisions, and, the science of decision making and the performance and the art of decision making is practicing what ends up successful. So changing the thought, if you can challenge that thought that happens first, then you can lead to a more positive emotion. You can lead to a better clarity in the behaviour that you're about to take. So the question is, how do you change that thought? What do you do to tackle that thought? The number one thing is get better information. The number two thing is attack it like a scientist, I would say, which is have a look who's got the strongest hypothesis. Where are the smartest people out there that are doing this? And have they been able to replicate success more than once, more than twice, more than 10 times using the framework that they have? And like a scientist, that generates a hypothesis that's statistically pretty likely to work for you. So that's the question I would ask. I would seek out information and say, does this person's framework have success at the end of it? And is it replicated many times? take that information, pinch it, copy it, learn from it, absorb that, because that's going to help you channel your thoughts and your thinking around this situation into a place where you're going to feel more confident in certain aspects, or you're going to understand where there's going to be risks. All of a sudden it's more familiar because you're being mentored or you're copying someone that already has a framework that has replicated success. That just means, the emotions that you're going to have around that are going to be emotions that are going to precede better behaviours that are going to kind of help you make those leaps of faith from a place of clarity. And they're never going to be easy, but you just want to be making them from a place of clarity, from a place of self-assurance.
Our third highlight for today is from episode 37, which features our mentor team director, Herman Benade. So we actually made 2 fantastic episodes with Herman, both absolutely fascinating. But we've chosen this one as something that people would be surprised to know that we guide our members on is getting pay rises in order to support their portfolio. Now, this would be a very daunting experience for a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be. So here we talk about all the things that you should consider before you ask for a pay rise. Here's Herman. First of all, for most, I can almost safely say that there wouldn't be many people out there who feel comfortable or confident to ask for a pay rise, regardless of whether they deserve it or not. Some people are lucky enough to be offered a pay rise, but a lot of the time people really do have to go out there and make it happen themselves. So what are some of the things that people should consider before they ask for a pay rise?
Well, first you need to talk to your broker and get an understanding of what you actually need, right? So the broker tells you need a 50K increase, then you're not going to go and ask for a 50K increase. And if you do, good on you. But first find out how much you need. And a lot of the time, it's not a lot. We deal with this with our members all the time. It's 5K, 10K here, which is possible to get. For me, I don't understand why you wouldn't. I think you need to answer this question first. Am I adding value to the business? And the value that I'm adding to the business, is that more than what I'm getting paid at the moment? Going to have to think about it a little bit. So if you listen to our previous podcast and you've got an understanding of what the business does, and if it's a product-based business or service-based business, how much income do they make? Do they have capacity to actually give you a pay rise? Or are you working for a mom and dad type business and really kind of what comes in goes out? Then you need to ask those questions first, and then you'll feel a lot more confident when you actually go and ask for it. So I would say the first thing is, do you deserve one? Answer that question first. And if that's a solid yes, not an egotistical thing, but a solid, I'm here first in the morning, I'm here last at night, and I add value to the business, then start thinking, start planning, asking for it. Everything needs a plan.
Yeah. And even things like, are you underpaid for the work you're doing? Do you feel like you're doing 2 people's jobs? I don't know, have your responsibilities increased over time? Has your salary stayed the same? There's so much to consider there.
Yeah. Well, first, I would use tools again, like LinkedIn, Seek. Seek is a really good tool where essentially you type in your job, you type in where you live, and it will tell you whether you're getting paid market rate, below market rate, or above market rate.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know Seek did that. And there's also Glassdoor and Fishbowl as well, which are great, but I didn't know that about Seek. That's great.
I would definitely go with Seek over Glassdoor is really good if you want some insight in terms of what the culture is like for the business.
Yeah.
But Seek owns the monopoly in Australia on job ads, really.
Sure.
So the amount of data that they gather, it will give you a really good indication on whether you're being paid fairly or not. Now, also good to understand if your job title is, I'll just go back to sales consultant, but you're also doing all the administration in the business. You're also doing reception duties. You're basically a bit of an all-rounder. Read that job description and go, okay, well, am I doing one person's job? Am I doing 2 people's job? Not that your business is taking advantage of you, but stuff happens in life and you get given more responsibility, but for some reason that pay rise conversation doesn't happen as often as really what it should.
Yeah.
So once you have a clear understanding of where you sit in the market, right?
Yeah.
Then you basically, and you've identified that the business has capacity to actually give you a pay rise, and you might not know that 100%, but you need to give it a bit of thought, and you believe you've got a solid case to why you need one, then go and ask for it, right? It's really important to get in the right mind frame first, right? It's not like your business is doing you a favor by giving you a pay rise. You've got a contract with your employer, your time and skill set in exchange for a salary. So once you've done all your checks, basically you want to book an official meeting, okay? So don't just rock up to your manager's desk and say, hey, I need a pay rise. Definitely don't do it. Don't.
So no Friday night drinks or anything like that? That's not the time to do it.
You're not going to get it, essentially. Don't ask in front of other employees in the business. So book a meeting and tell your manager what the meeting's about. Don't just spring it on them, because that gives them time to kind of go, okay, well, I know what's coming. The person deserves it. So you might walk out of that meeting with the actual pay rise, right? So don't expect the worst. Don't expect the no, because if you've ticked those first three boxes, your employer is probably thinking the same thing you are.
Our fourth highlight is from episode 9, which was all about new versus existing properties. Now, this episode features the Property Mentors CEO, Luke Harris, where we talked about a bunch of things. We talked about why you shouldn't get emotionally attached to your investment properties, how depreciation schedules differ for new and existing properties, why some people are reluctant to buy off the plan. But in this clip, Luke talks about the long list of benefits of buying new. So I hope you find this helpful. Here's Luke. So let's talk about new and off the plan, because the depreciation is actually one of the positives. But talk to me about new and off the plan and some of those positives as to why someone would choose that.
Well, the main thing that we love about the positives with new and off the plan is the fact that those tax benefits can really help you to fast track your property portfolio. I don't know why you would leave money on the table if the government is offering it to you by the way of tax deductions. Why would you not take that? Right. And when we're looking side by side, one of the positives of buying new property, and this is what I've been doing for the last 10 years, is buying new properties that give me fantastic tax benefits. And also the demographics of tenants are changing. More and more people are renting these days, and the people that are renting are wanting to stay for longer. People are moving to lifestyle areas. They're moving to aspirational suburbs that they couldn't afford to live in otherwise. And, you know, they're happy to rent. People are happy to rent for a long time. There's plenty of people that I know as friends and family that are renting and really don't plan on buying. They're quite happy where they are. And because of that, the type of tenant that we have now versus the type of tenant we had 20 or 30 years ago, it's very different. When I grew up, a lot of people, if you were living in a rental, the schoolyard conversation was that, that person was poor because they had to rent. Why can't you buy a house? And that was just a schoolyard mentality. I was literally, 10 or 15 years at the time. Yeah. People that I know that are quite successful that are renting. And so the demographics of tenants are massively changing over the last decade, and we're seeing people renting for longer. And what that means is that tenants are treating their rental property that they're renting as their home. It's not a transitional place where they might stay for 6 or 12 or 18 months. It's where they're going to live for 2, 3, 4, 5 years or more. And because of that, people are looking for something that's more comfortable to live in, that has all the modern conveniences. They want stone bench tops. They want, nice clean kitchens and bathrooms.
A working air conditioner.
Working air conditioners, clean carpets, and they don't want, snotty-nosed, kids that have run around and left the walls in a mess. They want to have new and nice properties, and tenants are attracted to those and will pay more for a newer property that they can move into, knowing the fact that it's theirs, right? And they're going to really set themselves up. And because of that, newer properties tend to rent faster and they rent for more. And the other thing as well is that the new properties, and this is one of the massive things that I love, is that the repairs and maintenance for the first 10 or 15 years are virtually zero. Okay, so when you're buying a new property, you really have a carefree investment. And there's a few factors that we have to look at here. First of all, if you're going to get tax benefits, that means there's less money out of your pocket every week and every month.
Yeah.
Okay, because the government, essentially the tax office, is supporting you with that property. The tax man or the tax person pays for a percentage of that property by giving you those tax benefits. The tenant pays a huge chunk of that, and you only pay a small component of that. That's the first part. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're getting those things. Because of the fact that we've got a new property, we don't have huge repairs and maintenance to worry about. We don't have to have hot water systems breaking all the time. Often they've got very solid warranties when they're brand new. The carpets, the light fittings are all LED these days. They last for 20 years. So everything in the property is designed, with that in mind, sustainability in mind. And of course, this is the sort of thing that tenants want. So you're always going to have a tenant. But the thing is that if you've got a low maintenance property, you're not going to have to spend extra money on repairs and maintenance. So you're not have to put extra money into the property because you're getting tax benefits. You're not having to put money in for repairs and maintenance. And what that means is that you've then got leftover money that you can put in towards your next property.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, hey.
If you've got a happy tenant that's happy to stay there, they're happy to pay a good rent because it's a new property and they're comfortable there. Remember, this is someone's home. We're providing accommodation for people. We're not just transacting on buildings. We're actually providing accommodation for people to live in. So people spend a huge amount of time finding the right property. If they're happy there, they're going to stay. And so this is the balancing act where getting the right property in the portfolio, getting the right property fit, essentially, is going to allow you to secure a portfolio of properties that are going to be paid for largely by the tax office and largely by the tenant. And if you don't have to put money in every month, if you don't have to have repairs and maintenance, what that's going to mean financially is that you can afford to buy your second or third or fourth property on top of that.
Our fifth and final highlight that we wanted to share in this series includes one of the most memorable anecdotes that I think we've had on Investor Intelligence. So this is from episode 8, featuring our Director of Property Management, Renee Whitehouse. So if you're a regular listener of the podcast, one thing we're always mentioning is the importance of having a good property manager by your side. And this clip is just one of many examples as to why, but I'll let Renee explain that. Here she is. So speaking of self-managing, a lot of landlords I know try to manage their properties on their own to save a few bucks here and there, but what difference does it make having a good property manager by your side to actually do all those everyday things for them instead of them doing it themselves?
So if you have an owner that's self-managing as opposed to us managing a property for them, that particular owner may not be aware of the legislation that's going on, how they process an application and check references and do all background information on that particular person who's interested in moving in. A thorough condition report is a huge value for the end of their lease. So that's what's basically holding their bond, and comparing that to when they moved in initially, and also the risk management side of things.
Yeah, so on risk management, I know there's quite a lot in there that, I'd never even heard of. So I'm guessing a lot of homeowners aren't going to hear of it either. But what kind of risk are you minimising? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, with the risk management, it would be around putting the right tenant into a property. Again, with the legislation, in getting the safety checks done and making sure the property is habitable. So I've come across plenty of applications that don't match up. So it comes with experience of checking an application thoroughly, doing social media, in inverted commas, stalking, doing all the reference checks, and sometimes things may look good on paper, but they also don't add up at the same time. And we also go by a gut feel too when we meet people. And that would be a great example if an owner doesn't have that experience and the gut feel of meeting someone. The horror stories that you see on Today Tonight and A Current Affair of tenants trashing houses, it's a huge, huge shame. But most of those things that you see aren't managed by a property manager. And also those owners may not have landlord insurance, which would be huge cost for them to get their property back up to scratch.
So they're very avoidable problems.
Very
that
avoidable.
You're aware of, but homeowners. Okay, so that's definitely a downside to not having a property manager for sure. So
can I tell you a story?
Absolutely.
So, classic example of an owner who had engaged us as a property manager. I met this particular person who was looking at renting the property. As soon as I met him, I had a huge gut feel that something was not right. And he applied for the property the next day. His application that he put forward was very basic, very limited information. I put it forward to the owner and also added a note to say that I didn't feel comfortable meeting him. I don't feel comfortable putting him in, but it's your decision at the end of the day. She told me to go ahead with the application because the property had been vacant for a few weeks. She wanted at least. Anyway, we put him in, and a few weeks later, a few issues had occurred with him doing damage to the property, but also he stopped paying his rent. And then about 6 or 7 weeks into him being in this property, he got arrested because he had been cooking drugs in the house. So this owner, her landlord insurance was at the basic level, and she did not have the higher level to cover the cost of cleaning up in terms of that situation with the drugs. So it ended up costing her about 20 grand to get the property back up to scratch, plus the property being vacant for that period of time in terms of it being cleaned and painted and whatnot. So if she had have listened to me in the first instance of me giving my gut advice and saying I didn't agree with putting him in, and maybe it had been sitting vacant there for another couple of weeks, she would have only lost maybe $1,000 or $1,200 in rent as opposed to $20,000.
Wow. I mean, what would you know? You've only got 20 years of experience behind you.
But only 20 years.
I guess that kind of shows what happens sometimes when you cut corners. If she just maybe waited for a
couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, wow. Guys, thank you so much for listening to our summer series. I hope you enjoyed them. And of course, if you want to listen to any of the full episodes, you can check out the show notes to see which number episode you're after. Please feel free to scroll through all of our other episodes if you're looking for a particular topic. Chances are we've covered it, and if we haven't, make sure to subscribe because I'm sure we'll cover it in future. As always, if there are any questions that you want answered on an upcoming FAQ episode in 2023, you can head to our website investorintelligence.com.au to submit that. Once again, from the team here at the Property Mentors, we hope you had a wonderful Christmas. We hope you're enjoying your summer, and we look forward to bringing you even more episodes in the new year.